All right, so let's talk about keynotes. Keynotes, I think, are probably one of the things that I was most afraid of when I started Revit, honestly, because it's somewhat of a complicated process to work with keynotes in Revit. Um, but it's really not as terrible as you think it's going to be, actually. Hold on, I'm going. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to keynote. And the main thing I want to sort of convey about keynoting is that the way that Revit works with keynoting is it uses a text file to maintain all of your keynotes or to keep them organized. And then Revit reads the text file to apply the keynotes into the project. Okay. And what that means is that there isn't a place in Revit where I, for example, would start something that says like, start a new keynote legend. And then I start typing in things like metal panel and lap siding and earth and rain gutters, right? There's not a place in Revit where I keep that information. There's a place external from Revit that I keep that information, and then I reference it from the program, right? And that was kind of the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around when I started doing this. Let me just show you where the Keynote kind of settings are kept. If we go to annotate here and I go down to Keynote, okay, we have a couple of different keynotes. We have by element, by material, by user, and then we have settings. And I'm going to click on settings here. And we have some different places where we can save that Keynote file, that text file, right? Right now it's saved in the library. All right, so you'll see program data, Autodesk, Revit, 2019 libraries, and it's a TXT file. Okay, and then we have numbering method. So I think the first thing that I'm going to do here is I don't want to change the library text file for my keynotes for this specific project. So I'm going to browse, and I'm going to do, we've got a bunch of different keynotes here. So you're going to see we have Imperial keynotes. There's a bunch of other ones that I probably never use, metric, uniform classification, whatever, right? But essentially, you could start a brand new blank TXT file, which is just a notebook file. But I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to hit copy. This is a little bit of a workaround. I'm going to cancel out of that. And then wherever you are keeping your files, so for example, you guys, we'll get you started on the Keynote file. You're keeping yours in CAD Common. And we're going to go to Arch and 2510. Oh, right there. And I'm going to paste it in there. So, and what I like to do is I like to give it, Revit Keynotes, and we'll give it a name for this project, right? So, townhomes. Okay, whatever it is, right? If I double click on that, there's a lot of keynotes in here, right? And this is the by default keynote file that you get from the Revit library. I know, it's intense, right? I think so. In a large commercial project, makes sense to have all these things. And what they're trying to do is trying to say, hey, there's a lot of stuff in a commercial project, and we're going to put a lot of it in here for you, right? So that you don't have to essentially remember to put it all in there, or the terminology, right? So door and frame to be removed, and these numbers, they correspond to a specification section, right, from your specification. But with our residential project, I've never gotten really this complicated where I have to start with something like this, right? And so what I usually will do is I will copy the Keynote file from Revit, and I like to copy it because I know it's going to work, right? I can start a TXT file, but I could potentially also do something wrong in that TXT file, and then it wouldn't work with Revit. And so what I usually will do is I will come in here and we'll grab everything all the way to the top, and I'll delete a lot of stuff. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff. And this, like I said, it makes sense with a large commercial project, right? Because there's so many things and it's so hard to remember what kind of stuff to put in there, right? So I'm just going to grab it all, very comprehensive, and I'm going to hit delete. Okay, and I'm going to file, save.
Wait, why did you steal it if you're just going to blank it out anyway then?
Because I wanted to make sure it worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
You know how every now and again there's nuances. You technically could start a new TXT file,
Yeah.
but if you did something wrong in it, then it may not work, right? So I like to go steal the one I know is working. So I have my Revit Keynote file here. And to remind you, that Revit Keynote file, it's saved here in your folder, your project folder. Which means that whenever I enter a Keynote here, in order for Revit to read it, it has to go back to this location, read it, and then apply it to the project. All right? Uh-oh. Okay. All right, so I've got this file open. Now, let me just talk about a few kind of weird things about Revit Keynote files, okay? So there's a lot of little programs out there that you can get to manage these things, right? There was one that was called EMC squared that we used at Method, and that I had used it. I used it at AJC actually, because the guy that sort of helped us, you know, me and this other guy, we transitioned into Revit. He brought it with him, and it had some nice features to it. Had some nice features to it in that it allowed multiple people to have access to the Keynote file and make changes at different times. And it also allowed you to search the Keynote file. Okay, so this Keynote file basically is sitting on your Revit server, and you're adding keynotes to it. You're hitting save, and those save changes are updating in your Revit project. Now, there's a problem with this whole system because multiple people can actually open this and multiple people can change it, but not everybody can save it at the same time and have all of their changes saved, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So the problem occurs where, like, you and I are working and you make changes and maybe don't hit save, and I make changes and I hit save, and all of your changes are overwritten. Okay, so there's an inherent problem with this system, that when you're working on a big team, and this happens no matter what, a lot of times people will say, well, I'm going to manage the Keynote file, so if you need to make a Keynote, please make me aware, which is, you know, kind of a pain in the neck, but it's kind of a necessary evil. It's also really not highly searchable, so once you get 50 or 60 keynotes in here, I can't just say, like, start typing storm drain and have it pop up. I have to kind of look through all the keynote lists, the list of keynotes, and find the keynote I need to apply it. Okay, but those are kind of those are two big things, but those are the two main issues with Revit keynotes. Number one, that, you know, it's not very easy for multiple people to work in it, right, without losing information. And then you can't search it. So if it gets really large, it's cumbersome. And that's why we purchased these kind of in-between programs to allow multiple users to add multiple keynotes at the same time, but then also it's searchable and makes it easy. Okay. So I'm just going to close this out real quick. That's my Keynote file. And I'm going to come back here to my little Keynote icon. Okay. And I'm going to choose Keynote settings. And I've changed the location of my Keynote file, right? So I'm going to hit browse, and I'm going to browse to wherever I have moved my Keynote file, which is under CAD Common Arch 25, where is it? 2510 fall, right? There we go. And then Keynote file. So I click on it, I hit open, and by doing that, sorry, I forgot to change that. It's not at the library location, it's relative. By doing that, now instead of reading the library location file, I'm reading the file off of the shared drive. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. And now when I start creating keynotes within that file and applying them to Revit, Revit is going to read the right information from the right file. All right. Does that make sense so far? Somewhat? Okay. All right, so there's a couple of things we have to do in Revit to get our keynotes to work. Number one, we have to place them, but number two, in order for them to be read on our sheets, we have to create a keynote schedule. Sorry, I always forget. Keynote legend, sorry. A keynote legend in order for them to be put on a sheet and readable. Okay, so I'm going to go to my sheet here, A101. Oh, you guys don't, I forget, sorry. That's okay. Let me create a new sheet here. And we'll call this, it hurts, doesn't it? Yeah, your text is overlapping. Maybe you could make this little guy shorter, like by half, and then get more space in here if you wanted.
That's not my title block. I don't know why that text is showing up at all.
Oh, you know what? It's probably having because it's on my computer. I bet that's why.
Could be. Because that's just the standard Revit title block.
And this one's called 1B. Rename this. Okay. There's our exterior elevation. And I'm going to turn off the crop region, and it looks pretty good. Okay. All right. So I can add keynotes to this, right? And the idea is that when I have a keynotes here, that there's a little legend over here, like a little spreadsheet that kind of outlines all of the different keynotes, right? So I have to, number one, create the keynote file. I have to route the keynote file to Revit. I have to add keynotes to that keynote file then. Then I have to add the annotation, but in order for the annotation to read on the sheet, I have to add a new keynote legend, right? Once you do this once or twice, it'll make sense, but
It's really convoluted.
it is very convoluted. Can you tell why I was really hesitant to do this because there are so many steps I kept thinking I'm going to miss something and it's not going to work.
It's one of the few things that AutoCAD is just more simple.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Because once you have it set up,
It seems very convoluted.
but the second that you change a
I
keynote
guess
in
once it's
AutoCAD,
done,
yeah, and it's not hard once you wrap your mind around it. But when you change a keynote, it automatically renumbers everything in the list and it
That part
coordinates.
sounds great.
That's
So
amazing.
It's better for the editing. It's just harsh for the setup.
Yes, and usually once you go into a firm, they'll have all this set up already. Like you'll create a sheet and everything will be on it, and they'll be like, "Here's your keynote file. This is how we do it. It'll work out."
You can do that in AutoCAD.
Oh, sure, you can do it in AutoCAD. You know what? I'll tell you though, this is the main reason why I don't want to do a project in AutoCAD, because if I delete a keynote, I don't want to have to go and find it on wherever it's located, or if I have to renumber, I don't. That is
I hate
so
having a bunch that's
burdensome.
not used too, and you don't want to renumber all
Right.
of them. And yeah,
Right.
It would make that stuff a lot easier.
So let me show you how it works, and then you guys will all be converted to little Reviteers. Or Reviteers. All right, so I'm going to right click on legend and I'm going to click new keynote legend. Okay, and we'll just leave it as keynote legend. I'm going to hit OK. And essentially, keynotes know that you're going to need a value and a text, right? So they don't really give you, they kind of set it up for you essentially, right? This schedule. This is a schedule. So I'm going to hit OK. And it bumps me into my keynote legend, which I'm going to close out of. Okay, but right here, my keynote, and this is a legend, and I want to, sorry guys, it's a legend, and what's nice about a legend, if you remember, is that I can use it on multiple sheets, right? So I can take this, and I can pull it onto this sheet, but I can also take it and pull it onto other sheets, and it doesn't get locked out, right? So if I had actually used a schedule, I can only pull a schedule onto one sheet before it locks out, and it won't allow me to put on multiple sheets. So I'm going to grab this and drag it over, and it's not going to look gorgeous. We'll have to make it look gorgeous. But I do see the things that I'm going to need here. So I see a value that's going to be generated, and I see a text that's going to be generated.
And those are generated from the text file?
Yes. Yep. So whatever the text file says here, it'll say here, essentially. All right. So that's what I have to do now. I have to go to my text file, and I have to start adding keynotes, and then I can assign them to my project. So it's confusing, right? But I'm going to open up my text file. And usually I'll keep this like over here on my other screen, right? Open at the same time as my Revit file. And I'll be generating these at the same time I'm working over here. So we can type like O1, I'm going to do a tab, and then let's do something like new window. All right, file, save. And you have to save. So there's a couple of weird workflows.
Well, can I just print something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
You have to be quiet though. That's my rule. I was going to say the print room might be a little better. So new window, right? And I file and I save. Now, What I sort of like to do is I like to keep a running list of keynotes that I use a lot for like a residential project, because I like to paste like 15 or 20 of these in, kind of the most commonly used items, and save it so that what I have to do next, I don't have to do 30 times, which you'll see. I'm going to pull this over here. I'm going to drag that over. I'm going to try and keep my Keynote file and my other stuff on the same screen here. There we go. So in order for this Keynote, once I've saved it, to read over here, I have to do Keynote settings and I have to reload. So every time I create a new Keynote, I have to reload this, which is kind of a pain in the neck. Okay, I know. We talk about that in a second. Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of different types of keynotes in Revit. There's an element keynote, and this element keynote, if I keynote something using an element keynote, it reads the information off of that keynote, off of that object. So for example, if I have a door and there's a keynote value in the door, it will read that keynote value. So, I can't select your model. But in families, let me see if I can, in families how your links are messing with my system here. DR, let's see if I can we'll just add a fake wall right there. DR door. Okay, there's a door.
Problem solved.
I know, there you go. And let me stack these two. There we go. And if I hit edit type on my door, do you see we've got a keynote value here? Right? So I could click on this little guy, or I could come in here and I could choose to assign a keynote to it. And if it's available in my legend over here, right, keynote value, let me in fact add this one. We'll do number 2, new door, Control S, save. I would like to say that I know it's a little bit finicky, but because this is the worst part where you have to reload it, right? Okay, but if I click on my door and I hit edit type and I go down to my keynote here, there's a little ellipsis and I can click on that and I can assign new door and hit OK and OK again, okay? And nothing is changed, right? But I've assigned that keynote value to that object. And so if I want to use an element keynote, okay, when I click on that element, it already assigns a keynote to it and it knows, right? I click on number 1 and it says new door, right? So I'm inherently building in the value of the keynote into the object, all right? And then when I keynote it, if I use a user or an element keynote, it reads the element. If there's not a keynote assigned to the element, then whatever I assign to the keynote, it assigns that value to the element. Does that make sense? So it works backwards. And you're thinking, well, how does it know what number to give it on the sheet, right? Well, it sequentially numbers them. So right now,
so numbering doesn't have anything to do with
like this right here,
file, yeah,
right?
door
No,
is not, okay.
nope, because
Basically how you start, that's how it's gonna.
exactly. Yep, exactly. Okay. Now, sorry, I forgot. This might be a little bit, well, let's see, maybe this won't be on the sheet. Patrick, we're gonna have to put a door in front of your little elevation here. Let's see, there we go. So now I've keynoted that. I have an element keynote, right? And it's gonna be blocking our, right, isn't that nice? But now because that element is in this view, right? Now my keynote legend is reading it.
Does it show anything that they can see, essentially? That's awesome.
Yes. Okay. So essentially, and
You have to add the actual keynote to the sheet still, right?
yes, so you can, yes, you can do,
Still gonna say 1,
it's gonna, like on other sheets,
or this sheet.
on this sheet it'll be number 1. Yeah, this is number 1.
Or is it gonna do the same for any other sheet?
You can do it either or. So you can set it so that every sheet, new door is number 1. Or you can set it so that it numbers per sheet. So that, this sheet is number 1, but on another sheet it might be number 7.
Yeah.
You can do whichever one you want. Okay, so because that's showing in my view, right, click, and I'm going to Keynote element, right, I did it in my floor plan. There we go. Okay, so that's really nice. So now, you know, that element inherently has that value associated with it, which is great. Okay, so that's really great until you have maybe an element that you don't want to assign a value to, or it's difficult to, right? And so we also have, I'm going to skip over material just for now, but I'm going to go to user Keynote, which is probably by far the most used one that I use, right? And I use it because it gives me a lot of customization, I'll use that word, in my Keynote values, right? There may be families that I've downloaded online. There may be wall types or window types or storefront or other things that maybe have an element value that, an element value that I don't want shown in my keynotes, right? But I don't want to go through and change all of them. So instead, a user keynote will allow me to assign any value to an object without changing that object. Okay, so I could click on user keynote. Oh, shoot, the problem is we have links in here. Keynote, user keynote. I just have to pick something. Oh, it's allowing me to do it. Okay. I just have to pick something. Well, I wanted to assign a value to the family, so I couldn't pick the family. Yeah. So it's reading the elements. It's just not allowing me to edit the families. So now I can pick on the same door if I wanted. And I could say, well, instead of new door, I want it to say new window. I could hit OK, and I can kind of fake in what I want that value to be. Does that make sense? So this is a really, the user keynote is a very generic one. I can click on an element and give it a value without assigning that value to the actual family. Okay? And then
That's better.
it is better.
You have a list here of all the elements. It's gonna offer you the
Right.
Oh, okay. This you know it's a door or it's a window.
Right. Exactly.
In the drawings.
Yeah. You get to pick what it is instead of that object reading its information, right? And like I said, immediately it's not presenting a problem, but when you're downloading families or whatever, and they have this, like, they use a brand name or whatever, you know, they're like, Pella, you know, and you're like, I just wanted to say new window, see door, window schedule, right? Yeah, and the manufacturers will build in like a giant keynote that takes you to their website and tells the finishes, and which is wonderful, right? But that's what the difference between a user keynote and an element keynote. So element tags the actual element and reads information, and user keynote allows you to generically assign something to an object. Okay. Material keynote, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into like the building sections, but this will allow you to pick specific like layers of a wall and assign a material to it. Okay, so in a detail, if you have like plywood and then you have insulation and then an air gap, you can use the material keynote to tag all those materials in your detail instead of using like generic text to keynote all of your different elements in your sections. All right, so let's do a couple. I'm going to add a few more keynotes. Maybe we'll do, and let's see, let's do roof, roof, and we'll do finish grade, and we'll do barbecue, and then we'll do, let's see, what else do we have here? Front door. Bar. You guys like to rub it in, huh? I can't have any drinks. You just wait until March. That's really.
You just wait till March. I like to wait till 5 o'clock.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I have all these new keynotes, right? File, save, and that sort of finalizes them in the keynote text, in the text file here. And then, of course, I have to go back to keynote settings, reload. I wish there were a way that you could just type like RL reload and it would reload your keynotes, but I haven't.
I was gonna ask if there was a
There's
quicker way to do that.
no, and it used to be that you used to have to browse to the file to reload it, so they've at least shortened it.
This is a surprisingly
I-
archaic way of doing this for surprised they haven't figured out a better. This will improve soon.
I think so.
This feels very old school.
It
Whenever
is.
we're referencing a text file, I'm like, oh, that's not very Revit.
I know. I guess the nice thing is that this sort of allows you to take one that you already have and use it generically with a lot of other projects.
They should make it so you can edit it within Revit.
Within Revit, I agree.
That's, I think, the next step, and then it's fine.
But now if you have 30, 50 of these, I can't search it. I can't say, where's the...
I was thinking if Revit just had a way to view the text file and edit it within Revit and be able to search,
it would
then
be...
everything's fine.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
But for right now, this feels a little old school.
So let's do a few more of these, and I'm going to show you so I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to watch what happens when I hit delete. Oh, what is going on? Where are my Keynote values? Where did they go?
Maybe because you added the user one.
Oh, maybe I need to reload. Uh-oh. Something wrong? What have I done?
There is no.
Well,
I think it's because of the user one. It got confused what's what.
No, I don't think so. Because it doesn't actually associate itself with the object. It just kind of like says, oh, hey, this is what you want to talk about. It doesn't change the meaning of it. So let's do this. Let's pick it like this. So we'll do...
So I have to go to mine
It's
instead of the same.
It's something in your link.
Which is saying that I have a different key.
Yeah.
Probably in his model it needs.
We'd have to go to all of ours and connect them all to the same one. Then we should.
Then it will work.
see
Yeah.
it. But for right now, all three are on generic and.
That's tricky. They're all on their library one. So when I yes. So let me add an object in here, and I'll just keynote that. Let's see. I wonder if it will do a detail line. Hold on, let me just add something in here. What can I add? Like a component in elevation view. Couch? No. Let's go to the floor plan. There we go. Level... Is level 2 outside in your model?
That part of it is, yeah.
Okay. Work around. Okay.
Design is struggling,
There we go. So
wait,
now
it's floating.
it's floating, so I could see it.
Double awesome.
So there's my user keynote. I just have to be able to pick an object. It doesn't matter which one, right? So now I could come in here and I could click this and I could say, well, this is a front door, right? And hit OK. And now I can do keynote, user keynote, and we'll pick the same thing and we'll say, hey, this is a glass railing, right? Oh, it's still conflicting. I've never had that happen that terribly, though. It was reading them before. Yep. Oh, no question. Anyway.
That's odd, because what you're affecting is not anything linked, so it shouldn't.
Well, I worked on interior design projects where we have a linked architectural file and then the interior design work done inside, and I've never had an issue. I wonder if it's, no, it's not. Well, anyway, you guys get the idea. We'll just say that. You guys get the idea. You guys get the idea. So that's how your keynotes are going to work. So if your keynotes aren't working, though, that might be, well, if you all route them to the exact same spot, it should work then. Ideally. Just like you said, ideally, yeah. So as sort of a workaround, that's why a lot of places use, well, this is the main reason why I don't use AutoCAD. So I want to find it. There's a Keynote Manager Revit at the App Store. Gives the user a Keynote palette directly within Revit with simple, intuitive editing controls.
Get it?
So why?
Why
I'm
isn't
gonna-
this baked in?
For real. I'm gonna download this and see if it works. Not today, not right here, but I'll do it on my laptop. This will be amazing though. But that's why these are downloaded. I'll make, you can do it if you want, but I'm gonna make sure it works. But that's why you can find like different Keynote managers, and it will like see modify, manage, full access. Okay, that's okay. I'm gonna do that. But that's how you're gonna start adding keynotes. Now, again, the nice thing is that I can go to like if I have A101 here, right? And oh boy, let's do a new sheet. Okay, and I want to pull another like a floor plan on here. Of course, it's already on a view. Oh, here we go. That'd be revolutionary if that is it a free app? Does it say?
I'm not sure. I think so.
If you have the Autodesk product. Or like just integrate it into Revit, people.
I was gonna say, why is this even a separate download?
So the nice thing now, I have the Keynote legend. I can just drag it over again, right? I can click and I can place it, and I can start adding keynotes to the next thing that needs keynotes, essentially. Now, the Keynote table looks like this by default, and it's not beautiful, right? But I can edit the way it looks. So I can click, and within here, within the Keynote legend view, I can come over here to the fields, filter, sorting and grouping, formatting, and appearance. And I can go to appearance, and I can do things like remove the grid lines, right? Or I could change the title, the text if I wanted to. I can change it to whatever I want it to be, right? So a lot of times I'll go in and do that. And then it sort of changes the way it looks here, right? So you can go in, you can double click on this, and you can edit the way that it looks so that it sort of fits in with the information that you're going to have in your title block over here. But that's how you're going to Keynote, essentially. But why don't you guys, if route all of your Keynote files to the same place, and if it doesn't work, let me figure out how we're going to make that work.
I just did it for mine
And it works okay?
Well, I don't know, maybe if you reopen this main model, then
So I shouldn't save this one, right?
save it.
You could.
No, I'm not.
Save it
I'm
and
just,
reopen it, 'cause
that's
otherwise
okay.
you're gonna have to
It's all right.